Hey everybody, hope you guys are healthy and safe. So I've been using the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2 for about 2.5 weeks now, and the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4 for about 12 days. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my experiences with both, and I guess to answer the question which foldable is better. Now I'm going to be honest, it's going to be tough for me to come to a final conclusion because I really like both of these foldables, and I think each of them has one or two clear wins over the other. And then also each one has one or two critical flaws that just kind of bugs me quite a lot. So let's start by going over the pros and cons of each device. We'll start with the Xiaomi. I think you already know where this device beats the Galaxy Z Fold 4. It's the fact that it is significantly thinner at only 11.2 millimeters when folded and 5.4 millimeters unfolded. I've been using this thing for well over 2 weeks now, and I still can't get over how thin and light the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2 is. It weighs 262 grams. It's not just the fact that the Mix Fold 2 is thinner too, because it has a more conventional 21:9 aspect ratio on the outside screen, and the fact that it folds completely flat. The Xiaomi Mix Fold 2 really does feel like a slab normal phone when it's folded, whereas the Galaxy Z Fold 4, this candy bar shape is still a little bit elongated, and the fact the phone doesn't fold completely flat, it actually folds at an angle. Like this end right here, it's a little bit thicker than this end here. So this phone just does not feel like a normal phone when it's folded. Anytime I'm using the Z Fold 4 in this form, I'm constantly reminded by the in-hand feel that, oh yeah, I'm using a foldable phone. I can constantly feel the little pointy corner right here that jabs on my palm, and the fact that the phone kind of slopes down a little bit. It is not a normal in-hand feel, whereas the Mix Fold 2, if I close my eyes and I hold this thing, it really does feel like I'm just holding like an iPhone 13 Pro Max. A little bit heavier though. So in terms of in-hand feel, I just much prefer the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2, particularly because I two-hand type a lot. Like I just pound away at the keyboard with both thumbs, and this size allows me to type at my normal speed because it's almost like a normal flagship slab smartphone display. Whereas the Galaxy Z Fold 4 is still a little bit cramped to type if I try a two-hand thumb type like this, even though Samsung already made improvements by increasing the width of the display a little bit more. This is now a 6.2-inch panel with an aspect ratio of 23.1:9, so it's a little bit less tall and narrow than the Galaxy Z Fold 2 and 3's outside cover display. It's an improvement, but not all the way there. I still prefer my foldable phone to just feel normal when it's folded. The other area that I think the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2 does better than the Galaxy Z Fold 4 is I think MIUI on here has better animations than One UI. Xiaomi's animations have always been very fluid in my opinion, and I really like just cycling through apps, opening and closing apps, putting apps into split screen. Everything just looks a little bit more visually pleasing to my eyes than One UI, which, let's be honest here, One UI doesn't have the smoothest animations. So that's about it in terms of things that the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2 does better than the Z Fold 4. Really just two things. Granted, these are two kind of important things, like how the phone feels in your hand and also the usability of the outside screen. But if you do want to list all the things that the Z Fold 4 does better than the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2, the list is a lot longer than just two. Although, to be fair, honestly, some of these things just don't matter to me that much, but they do matter to you, so I'll list them out. So the first is wireless charging. This phone supports wireless charging at 15 watt speeds. A lot of you guys have mentioned the Mix Fold 2 not having wireless charging as a major flaw. To be honest, I don't really care. If the phone's battery life is good enough and it charges fast enough via cable, I don't really need wireless charging. Wireless charging is a luxury. It's nice to have, but I've never been like, oh, it doesn't have wireless charging, it sucks, it ruined my experience. Wireless charging is nice to have, it's a luxury, but I've never felt like, oh, this phone doesn't have wireless charging, now like my experience is ruined. So that's one. The second is S Pen support. So the inside screen of the Z Fold 4 supports Samsung's stylus called S Pen, but again, I don't really care that much for it because the S Pen experience is not as good as on the Galaxy S22 Ultra or the Galaxy Note, because you have to buy the S Pen separately. And the Z Fold 4 also doesn't have a place for you to store the S Pen. So the S Pen functionality, again, is something that just does not matter to me, but it matters to some of you guys. So these are two things the Z Fold 4 does better than the Mix Fold 2. that, I don't really care about. But then there are other things the Z Fold 4 does better that I actually really care about. The first is flex mode. That is the fact that the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4 hinge can stay in place at just about any angle. And it's awesome because this allows me to put the Z Fold 4 on a table and just film myself or take video calls hands-free. A lot of times I've taken photos of me and some friends with the Z Fold 4 just on a flat surface, and I didn't need to ask someone to hold the camera. The fact that the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2's hinge cannot stay in place is probably the biggest weakness of this phone. Another hardware thing the Z Fold 4 does better that actually matters is it has IPX8 water resistance. So the other day it was raining outside and I felt confident using the Z Fold 4 in the rain, whereas I probably wouldn't have been confident using the Mix Fold 2 in the rain. But perhaps the two biggest wins for the Z Fold 4, in my opinion at least, is number one, it has a much better zoom lens. It is a 3x telephoto zoom, while the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2 only has a 2x telephoto zoom. And also, the Galaxy Z Fold 4's 3x zoom is really good, whereas the Xiaomi's 2x zoom, it's a little bit mediocre. So you'll definitely see the difference when you jump up to 5x zoom or 10x zoom. The Galaxy Z Fold 4's 10x zoom is still reasonably okay, whereas the Mix Fold 2's 10x zoom, it's not good. The other thing the Z Fold 4 does better than So the final thing the Z Fold 4 does better than the Mix Fold 2, and this is also very important to me, is that the software is just more polished all around. Part of this is because the Galaxy Z Fold 4 is a global device, so it's optimized for Google Apps out of the box, whereas the Mix Fold 2 is a China device, so Google Apps are not optimized for this phone. Now, don't get me wrong, you can install Google Apps, and for the most part, they will run very well on this phone without issues, but there are still some optimizations Samsung has made that is not here on the Mix Fold 2. For example, on Gboard, it will open up in a split keyboard on the larger screen. And then when you close up the phone, it will go back to a normal keyboard. On the Mix Fold 2, Gboard cannot split at all. And on a large tablet screen, typing on a non-split keyboard is just very difficult. Now, you can use SwiftKey, which can split on the Mix Fold 2, but I'm someone who likes to use Gboard. Samsung's multitasking is also a little bit better than Xiaomi's, and it's mostly because of this new taskbar that Samsung introduced. So, I think you already know what it does, right? It's just a bar at the bottom of apps that you can quickly cycle between. And look at how fast they load. And these last two spots will also change depending on the last app that you are using. And if you don't want to use the bar, if you don't like that it gets in the way, you can hide it by just long pressing at the bottom. Now the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2 doesn't have that taskbar, so you cannot jump between apps easily, but Xiaomi still has this pull over menu that allows you to open apps in a floating window. So it's still pretty useful, still pretty functional, but the Z Fold 4 is just a little bit better at getting stuff done. Honestly, that's about it in terms of differences between using Samsung's foldable and Xiaomi's foldable. Many of the other performance areas are very, very similar. They both run on the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. They both have similar battery sizes, so whether it's gaming, whether it's battery life, whether it's editing videos, jumping in and out of apps, performance are very similar. And although I said Samsung's zoom lens is better, the other two lenses, the ultra-wide camera and the main camera, are actually pretty close. And in terms of the main camera, I like the colors on the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2's main camera is a little bit better because it has that Leica processing that dials up the contrast. It just suits my taste a little bit better. But for the most part, the main camera and the ultra-wide camera of these two phones are very, very similar. You'll only see the win for Samsung in zoom photos. So like I already said, if you were to list out all the areas that each phone wins, Samsung's list is longer. It has like 5 or 6 things that it does better than the Mix Fold 2, whereas the Mix Fold 2 only has 2, or maybe 3. I forgot to count the screen crease. The 2 or 3 things the Mix Fold 2 does better may be more important issues, because I like that the outer screen is a lot more usable for me. When I'm outside, out and about walking, I don't want to have to unfold the phone every single time. I like that with the Mix Fold 2, I can just type away at my full speed. I like that when I open up Instagram on the Mix Fold 2's outside screen, it actually loads in a normal aspect ratio, whereas on the Fold 4, it's either a little bit too narrow or a little bit too wide. However, the Z Fold 4 has flex mode, which I use quite a lot, and the software is just a little bit better for me to get work done. And that is why I'm so torn on which foldable phone to use. Because I am someone who, despite being a phone reviewer, I don't like taking 2 phones outside. I like to just use one phone. So in the last couple of days, I've been deciding which phone to put my SIM card in. Like every now and then, I'll pick up the Mix Fold 2 and I'll just be like, this thing feels so much better in my hand than the Z Fold 4, so I want to use this. But then when I open up the screen and I'm trying to type, I'll be frustrated by the fact that the Gboard does not split. So then I go back to the Z Fold 4, but then I'll notice I'm getting more typos when I'm typing on the Z Fold 4's outside screen, and the in-hand feel just doesn't feel as nice as the Mix Fold 2. So yeah, I am torn. It is, however, a first world problem that is unique to me. I think for a lot of you guys watching this, if you're based in the US, in Europe, you're just better off buying the Z Fold 4 because this thing sells officially where you're at. You'll get warranty, and Samsung has a lot of awesome trade-in deals, so you'll get a good value. Whereas if you want to buy the Mix Fold 2 in the US and Europe, first of all, there's no guarantee this phone will run 5G where you're at. And also you have to import this phone at a slight markup and you won't get warranty. So ultimately, when it comes down to it, my recommendation for which foldable phone you should get between these two is the Fold 4 for most of you guys. And if you ask me which phone is the better foldable phone overall, I will have to pick the Fold 4 too, just because the software is a little bit more polished. But I have to say, the areas that the Mix Fold 2 does better than the Z Fold 4, it is significantly better, and Samsung really needs to implement those changes to the next Fold 5. If the Fold 4 still comes with a really strong crease, and the phone that does not fold completely flat, and a phone that's a little bit chunkier, I'm going to be very disappointed, man, and I think you guys should be too. But for what it is right now, the Galaxy Z Fold 4 is still the best big screen foldable phone. So I hope this video was helpful for you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up or consider subscribing to my channel. I have a lot more content coming up, and I get my hands on all the latest foldables that aren't sold in the US. So if you're interested in that, subscribe to my channel. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching.